Imagine walking into your office on an ordinary Monday morning, coffee in hand. Same commute, same cubicle. You greet your coworkers with the casual wave you've done 1,000 times, but instead of waving back, they freeze. Their faces drain of color. Someone drops their phone. Another person backs away, hand over mouth, eyes wide with terror. And then your boss says the words that shatter reality. You died 6 months ago. We buried you. We were at your funeral. You laugh because it's obviously a joke, some elaborate prank. Except nobody's laughing. They're staring at you like you're a ghost. And when they pull up the photos of your casket, your grieving family, your name on a headstone, you realize they're not joking. They remember your death in vivid, perfect detail. The accident, the hospital, the funeral, everything. Except you don't remember any of it. Because you didn't die. You're standing right here, alive, breathing, confused. But to everyone else, you're an impossibility, a person who shouldn't exist. And the question that destroys everything you thought you knew about reality is simple. If everyone remembers you dying, which version of the truth is real? David Chen was 34 years old when he discovered he'd been dead for 6 months. April 2024, Portland, Oregon. He'd taken what he thought was a 2-week vacation to visit family in California. Normal trip. Uneventful. He came back rested, ready to return to his job at a tech startup where he'd worked for 8 years. He walked into the office building, swiped his badge at security. The guard stared at him, face going pale. "Mr. Chen, but you..." David smiled, thinking maybe he'd been gone longer than he realized. Maybe they weren't expecting him back yet. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, walked past the break room where colleagues were getting coffee. Someone saw him and screamed. Actually screamed, dropping her mug, ceramic shattering on the tile floor. Within seconds, a crowd formed, people backing away, people crying. One of his closest work friends, Marcus, stepped forward, hands shaking. "David, this isn't funny. This isn't... How are you here?" David's confusion turned to alarm. "What are you talking about? I just got back from vacation." Marcus pulled out his phone with trembling hands, opened Facebook, searched for David's name, and there it was, a memorial page. "In loving memory of David Chen, 1990-2024. Hundreds of comments, photos from a funeral. David's hands went numb. Marcus showed him everything. The accident had happened in March, according to everyone's memory. David's car was hit by a drunk driver on the highway. He'd died on impact. The company had sent flowers. Coworkers had attended the funeral. They'd seen his body. Closed casket, but his family confirmed it was him. There were photos, not of the body, but of the service. David's parents, devastated. His sister crying over the casket. A grave marker with his name, birth year, and death year carved in stone. David stood in the office hallway, staring at these images, feeling reality tilt beneath him. He remembered March. He remembered being alive, working, eating lunch with Marcus, going home every night to his apartment, living his life. He pulled out his phone, showed them his photos from the California trip, time-stamped in April after his supposed death. But Marcus just shook his head. "David, I don't know what's happening, but we buried you. Your parents buried you. The company hired a replacement for your position 3 weeks ago." David called his mother. She answered, heard his voice, and the phone clattered to the floor. When she picked it back up, she was sobbing. "This is cruel. Whoever you are, pretending to be my son, this is cruel." David tried to explain. She hung up. He drove to his parents' house. His father answered the door, saw David standing there, and collapsed. Literally fell to his knees, gasping. David's mother came running, saw him, and screamed like she'd seen a demon. They wouldn't let him in. They called the police. Said someone was impersonating their dead son. David left before the cops arrived, hands shaking so hard he could barely drive. Sarah Martinez had a different experience, but the horror was identical. She was 28, living in Chicago, working as a graphic designer, One day in June 2025, she decided to surprise her old college friends by showing up at their monthly meetup at a downtown bar. She hadn't seen them in almost a year. Life had gotten busy, she'd been traveling for work. But she missed them, wanted to reconnect. She walked into the bar, spotted the group at their usual table, and waved. Every single person at that table went silent. One of her best friends, Jessica, stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "Sarah?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Sarah laughed, confused by the reaction. "Yeah, it's me. Surprise?" But Jessica wasn't smiling. She was crying, sobbing. The others at the table looked between each other, faces twisted in shock and fear. Another friend, Marco, pulled out his phone with shaking hands and held it up to show Sarah. It was a Facebook memorial page. Her face stared back from the screen. Sarah Martinez, 1997 to 2024. Gone too soon. Sarah felt her stomach drop. They told her she'd died of cancer. Aggressive, fast-moving. She'd been diagnosed, they said, in late 2023. She'd fought for months. They'd visited her in the hospital. They'd been there in her final days, holding her hand, saying goodbye. The funeral was in March 2024. They had photos. Sarah in a hospital bed, pale and frail. Sarah's family at the funeral, destroyed by grief. A grave in Oakwood Cemetery with her name on it. But Sarah had never had cancer. She'd never been sick. She was standing right here, perfectly healthy, staring at photos of a death she didn't experience. Her friends were terrified. Some backed away. Others reached out to touch her, as if testing whether she was solid, real. Jessica kept saying, "This isn't possible. You died. I watched you die." Sarah tried to explain. There'd been no illness, no hospital, no funeral from her perspective. But they had evidence. Medical records someone showed her on their phone, pulled from a memorial post. Photos spanning months documenting her alleged decline. Obituaries published in the Chicago Tribune. She was listed as deceased in official records. Sarah went to the cemetery they mentioned, found the grave, her name, her birth year, a death date that corresponded with her friends' memories. But she was alive. She touched the headstone with her own hands, felt the carved letters of her own name, and couldn't reconcile the impossible contradiction. Michael Torres confronted the darkest version of this phenomenon. He was 42, a high school teacher in Boston. In November 2023, he came home from a regular day of work to find his parents sitting in his living room. He hadn't given them a key, but the door was unlocked. They looked up when he entered, and his mother's face went from confusion to absolute horror. She fainted. His father caught her, lowered her to the couch, and then turned to Michael with an expression of pure terror. "You're not real. You can't be real. Michael killed himself 2 years ago." Michael felt the words like a physical blow. His father showed him the proof. A suicide note written in Michael's handwriting dated October 2021. The note talked about depression, about feeling like a burden, about wanting the pain to stop. Michael had never written those words, had never felt suicidal. His father pulled up photos on his phone. Michael's funeral, October 2021. Hundreds of people attended. Students, fellow teachers, friends, family. There were photos of Michael's grave, a headstone with his name and a death date 2 years in the past. But Michael remembered those 2 years, every day of them, teaching classes, grading papers, going to Red Sox games, living his life. His parents insisted he couldn't be their son. Their son was dead. They'd identified the body. There'd been an autopsy. Cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Michael went to the cemetery his father mentioned, Mount Hope Cemetery in Mattapan. He walked through rows of graves until he found it, his own name. Michael Anthony Torres, 1981-2021. He stood there, staring at his own death date, and felt his sense of reality dissolve. His parents wouldn't speak to him. They thought he was either an imposter or something supernatural. His school had records of his death. They'd hired a replacement teacher, held a memorial assembly, retired his classroom in his honor. But Michael had been teaching there for the past 2 years. Different students, but same job, same school. How could both be true? He contacted former students from before his alleged death. They remembered attending his funeral. They had photos of themselves at the memorial service. They remembered crying, remembered the impact his death had on them. Yet he'd taught many of them again the following year. They didn't remember that. In their timeline, he'd died. And the version of him that came after, that was someone else, or something else, or nothing at all. 3 people, 3 impossible situations. David, Sarah, and Michael are all alive, walking, breathing, existing in the physical world. But according to everyone they know, they died months or years ago. This isn't one person misremembering. This is collective memory. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of people sharing identical recollections of funerals, graves, deaths. Physical evidence exists: photos, obituaries, grave markers, death certificates filed with the state, social media memorial pages with thousands of interactions. The evidence says they died. But they're standing here, alive, insisting they never died at all. So, which reality is true? Are David, Sarah, and Michael experiencing a mass delusion where everyone else is wrong? Or are they the delusion, ghosts who don't know they're dead? Consciousness that survived death and now haunts a world that moved on without them? There's a third possibility, one that sounds like science fiction but is rooted in quantum physics. Maybe they did die. Maybe in one timeline, one branch of reality, they died exactly as everyone remembers. But their consciousness, that spark of awareness that makes them who they are, jumped to a parallel timeline where they survived. And now both realities are bleeding together. The people around them remember the death timeline, but David, Sarah, and Michael are living in the survival timeline. And neither side can prove the other wrong because both are equally real. There's a theory in quantum physics called quantum immortality, and it suggests something that sounds impossible until you understand the math behind it. Every moment, every decision, every quantum event creates a branching point where reality splits into multiple timelines. In one branch, the drunk driver hits your car and you die. In another branch, you swerve at the last second and survive. Both outcomes exist simultaneously in the multiverse. But here's where it gets disturbing. Your consciousness, your subjective experience of being alive, can only exist in timelines where you're alive to experience it, which means, from your perspective, you never die. You always survive. Every time death comes for you, your awareness simply continues in a branch where you didn't die. You experience immortality not because you're special, but because death is the one outcome you can never consciously witness. In every timeline where you die, there's no you left to know it happened. So you keep existing, keep experiencing, forever finding yourself in realities where somehow, impossibly, you survived. The people around you aren't so lucky. They experience all the timelines, including the ones where you died. And if those timelines start bleeding together, collapsing into each other the way quantum states sometimes do, then everyone remembers your death. Because in most branches, you did die. You just weren't there to see it. David Chen's case fits this pattern perfectly. According to everyone who knew him, he died in March 2024 in a catastrophic car accident on Highway 26. The crash happened at 11:47 p.m. A drunk driver crossed the median, hit David's car head-on. Both vehicles were destroyed. David was pronounced dead at the scene. His family identified the body. There was a funeral. He was buried. But David has continuous memory from that night. He remembers driving home from work. He remembers the headlights coming toward him, too fast, too bright, impossibly close. He remembers his hands gripping the wheel, his foot slamming the brake, and then nothing. Not blackness, not pain, just a skip, a discontinuity, like a video file with a missing frame. The next thing he remembers is arriving home safely, parking his car, walking into his apartment, going to bed. At the time, he didn't think anything of it. Maybe he'd zoned out. Highway hypnosis. That common phenomenon where you drive on autopilot and don't remember the journey. But now, knowing what he knows, David wonders if that skip wasn't memory loss. It was a quantum jump, the moment his consciousness leapt from the timeline where he died to the nearest adjacent timeline where he survived. and for months those timelines existed separately. In one, David was dead and buried. In the other, David was alive and well. Until something changed. Until the timelines merged or crossed, or whatever quantum mechanics calls it, when two incompatible realities try to exist in the same space. Now David is alive, but everyone remembers him being dead. Both truths trying to coexist in a universe that wasn't built for contradictions. Sarah Martinez's cancer death is even more impossible because there's a paper trail. Her friends showed her medical records, hospital admissions, chemotherapy schedules, doctor's notes spanning 7 months. Sarah read through them with a surreal sense of disconnection. The records described her symptoms, her decline, her final weeks. They mentioned conversations she supposedly had with doctors, decisions she made about treatment, but Sarah has no memory of any of it. She was never diagnosed, never hospitalized, never sick. Yet the documents exist. Not fake, not fabricated. Real medical records from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, with real doctors' signatures, real dates, real details. How does evidence of an event that never happened come into existence? One possibility is that Sarah did experience all of that, in a parallel timeline. A version of Sarah got sick, fought cancer, and died in March 2024. But this Sarah, the one standing here reading the records, is from the branch where she never got sick. And somehow the evidence from that other timeline bled through. Quantum artifacts. Physical proof of events that happened in a reality this Sarah never experienced. The records aren't fake. They're just from a different version of the truth. And when the timelines collapsed together, the evidence remained, even though the version of Sarah who experienced it didn't. Michael Torres's case is the darkest because suicide introduces intent. If quantum immortality is real, if consciousness always continues in timelines where you survive, then what happens when you try to kill yourself? From your perspective, the gun misfires, or you change your mind at the last second, or something intervenes. You survive. But from everyone else's perspective, in the majority of quantum branches, you succeeded. You died. They buried you. Michael's parents have vivid memories of finding his body, of the horror and grief that followed. They remember the note, the funeral, the unbearable weight of losing a child. But Michael has no memory of attempting suicide. He remembers October 2021 as a normal month, teaching classes, grading papers, living. Yet his family has evidence. The note exists, physical paper with his handwriting, even though he didn't write it. The grave exists. The death certificate is filed with the state. Michael is legally dead. His social security number is deactivated. His bank account's closed. His life insurance paid out. How do you fight that? How do you prove you're alive when the government's official records say you're deceased? Michael tried. He went to the Social Security office with his ID, his birth certificate, himself standing there, breathing and talking. They looked at him like he was insane. Their system showed him as deceased. Date of death, October 17, 2021. Cause, suicide. No amount of evidence could override what their database told them. In the eyes of the law, Michael Torres is dead. But he's standing in front of them, alive, insisting otherwise. The system wasn't built to handle quantum survivors. The psychological toll is devastating. David lost his job because his position no longer exists. It was filled after his death. His apartment lease ended while he was supposedly dead, his belongings disposed of. His family won't see him, convinced he's either an imposter or something supernatural. He's alive, but he has no life to return to. Sarah's friends are too traumatized to be around her. Seeing her alive violates everything they know about reality. Some think she's a ghost, others think they're going crazy. A few have cut off contact entirely, unable to cope with the cognitive dissonance of a dead person standing in front of them, smiling, breathing, existing. Sarah tried therapy, but how do you explain this to a therapist? How do you process grief for your own life, mourned by everyone you know, while you're still living it? Michael's situation is worse because the cause of death was suicide. People treat him differently. Even those willing to entertain the possibility that he's alive look at him with pity, with discomfort. with the weight of knowledge about the darkest version of his timeline. He insists he never wanted to die. But they remember his death. They remember the note. They remember the grief of losing him to suicide. And no matter how many times he says it wasn't him, they can't unremember what they experienced. There's a growing community online of people experiencing this phenomenon. They call themselves quantum survivors, timeline jumpers, Mandela refugees, people who are alive but exist in a world that remembers them dying. Most stay anonymous because the stigma is unbearable. But in private forums, they share their stories. A woman whose husband remembers her dying in childbirth, even though she and the baby are both alive and healthy. A man whose entire hometown remembers him drowning at age 16, but he's 32 now and has 16 years of continuous memory since the alleged death. A teenager whose parents insist she died in a school shooting, show her memorial pages and news articles with her name, but she was never at that school on that day. The common thread is discontinuity, a moment where something should have killed them, a near miss they barely remember, and then life continuing as if nothing happened. Except in everyone else's memory, they died. The evidence piles up. Photos of funerals, official documents, graves with their names, and the quantum survivors are left trying to prove they exist in a world that's already mourned them and moved on. The question that destroys sleep and sanity is simple. Are they alive or dead? David, Sarah, and Michael insist they're alive. They feel alive. They have continuous memory and experience. But what if consciousness can continue after death? What if they are dead, and this subjective experience of being alive is what comes after? How would they know the difference? If you're a ghost, would you know you're a ghost? Or would you feel exactly like you feel now, solid, real, present, while the living world around you insists you've passed on? There's no way to prove it one way or the other. David can't prove he's alive because all official records say he's dead. He can't prove he's the original David and not some quantum copy, some consciousness that splintered off and thinks it's the real one. Sarah can't explain the medical records that document a death she never experienced. Michael can't erase the suicide note written in his handwriting describing thoughts he never had. They're trapped in a paradox where their lived experience contradicts everyone else's memory, and both sides have evidence supporting their version of reality. Maybe the truth is that both are right. David died, and David survived. Sarah succumbed to cancer, and Sarah never got sick. Michael killed himself, and Michael kept living. All of it happened, in different branches of quantum possibility. And now those branches have merged, collapsed, folded back on themselves in a way that quantum mechanics says is possible, but human experience says is impossible. The result is people who exist in multiple states simultaneously. Dead and alive, gone and present, mourned and walking around asking why everyone thinks they're a ghost. Schrödinger's cat wasn't just a thought experiment. It's a description of what happens when quantum reality intrudes on human life. And David, Sarah, and Michael are living, or maybe not living, proof that the boundaries between possible worlds are thinner than we want to believe. Check your memories for gaps. Moments where you almost died but didn't. Near misses that felt too close. Because if quantum immortality is real, you've already died 1,000 times in timelines you're not conscious of. And in those timelines, people mourned you, buried you, moved on. But here you are, reading this, experiencing the one timeline where somehow you survived, and maybe someone out there remembers your funeral,